welcome back to the sculpture, and you can see I've been starting to make some progress on this, and it's getting more difficult. So as you are working on the sculptures, there are people that they get up to a certain point of the sculpture really fast, and then there are people that take some time to really work on the details, and I tend to be slow either way. I think I work fast in the beginning, but as you are getting to the details of the sculpture, I think it gets much harder for me. And this is something I've always struggled with because, there's a certain plateau that you reach as an artist. Like you start out really fast working on the sculpture, the base, and then you hit like this plateau. And in that plateau, it's very difficult to kind of push back up to the top, or at least push yourself more, like push to a higher degree of finish. This is the part that I struggle with, but I find that one of the helpful things that is useful to me is making the sculpture, like the general sculpture, and then taking little sections and working on it and really pay attention. I might say one day I'll work on the arm, one day I'll work on the chest, one day I'll work on the back, and I'll keep going left and right and just kind of bounce around the sculpture, because the proportions now are not really going to change much other than the minute details. And you might want to consider the level of detail that you put into your sculpture. You don't want to go overly detailed in a sculpture. Even when you look at sculptures from the Renaissance and some of the better artists that we know of, they don't add a lot of detail into their sculptures. Their goal is really not to make things realistic. And I think a lot of artists mistake that for realism. You can look at Michelangelo's David and say, oh, that's very realistic, but that sculpture in itself is not very realistic. It's an idealized version of the human body. And I think that's kind of like what you have to pay attention on sculptures. So I'm going to keep working on this, and I'm going to work on several of the details. We're going to have to really work on the head, because there is no personality or nothing to the head. And I'm probably going to consider researching some faces, because I don't really like the model's face. So we're going to keep working on this. We're going to add more detail, and hopefully within a few sessions I'm going to be pulling this off and finishing it. The last thing I want to do is just keep working on a sculpture over and over and over. And because this is water-based clay, it'll tend to dry out, and pieces are going to be drying out. So let's get started. And it's not exactly the most perfect thing in the world, and I decided to make his head a little fantasy-like, and normally I don't do that, but I thought it would be kind of cool to kind of have these big ears and lift them up. I'm not quite sure if I want to keep him bald. I might look for some sort of element, maybe a helmet, maybe something on his head. But I think I like the idea of creating something that's a little fantasy-like and couple it with some traditional type of structure that you would see on a old sculpture. I'm making his head, or this is the superciliary arch, and I'm going to make it probably a little bit more intense. Usually you see this in fighters and guys that have a lot of testosterone. They usually have a built-up ridge here. The face of a male, or the skull of a male, is a lot different than a female. And one of the things that you will see is this ridge right here being much more prominent in male, especially like athletes and guys who have a lot more muscle. I like to keep it much more geometric, much flatter. I like that it creates a little bit more of a strong edge. A lot of people might not like that. I've seen people take the skull and they'll just make it very, very soft throughout. and almost like a mannequin. And what I do is I look more for the geometry of things rather than anything else. So also you have these two frontal eminences. Look for them on skulls. Even females will have that. It might look kind of cool to have some sort of prop. Another thing that I tend to use if I want to blend the geometry, so with this water-based clay, I'll put some spray on the Sculpt, and then I'll take a rough cloth. You could use a shop towel like the way I'm using. These are really great, and you can get them at auto parts store, and you know, I just use them for a while and throw them away because they're just so cheap. It looks much nicer to have a face on there because that's going to give you the expression. And even though the face doesn't really match the body, I just like the idea of having something that's expressive. Guys, I have been doing quite a bit of work on the head. I don't have, say, the skull cap done yet. I'm not even quite sure what I'm doing, but I made his nose much wider. I am actually kind of making him almost troll-like, and I think I might even make him wider. He looks nothing like the guy I have in the pose, but that's what I wanted. I'm also making him look this way, and the way I do it is by scooping out the eyes in the direction that he's looking. I'll take my tool, for example, and I want him to look. It doesn't have to be like very detailed, but I'll just kind of scoop out a square, and that's pretty much all you need to kind of showcase the direction, because a lot of sculpture is about where the light is coming from. So if you do that, then it'll be fine. But you know, everything could change. And a lot of these sculptures for me are studies of learning how to sculpt. So even though this looks very different, I could still change it. I could still make the ears in a different shape. I was thinking about giving him like elf ears, but now that I think about it, it kind of might mean that it's a little bit too odd, and I might just keep it this way, nice and simple. It's not exactly perfect, but that's exactly what I want. One of the things I'm going to be doing is adding more detail to the face and the torso, and then just kind of drifting it off the lower leg and the foot and things like that. You don't need to put too much detail into your work. The best thing is, what I like to do anyway, is put detail onto my focus, which is the head and the torso. I really like that sort of area. The rest are going to be simple. The base, for example, is going to be very, very simple. I might even leave it like this. It really depends. I like to take like a sharp tool, let's say a very sharp knife, and just cut alongside of the base so it has some texture, but not anything that draws attention from the actual figure. So this is the sculpture for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, post up in the comments below and I'll try and answer them. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.